Gary Levine's Sundays always ended with a visit to his mother's grave. He might go to lunch with friends, play golf or tennis, but no matter what, Gary's day seemed incomplete unless he paid tribute to his mom. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like, and share this video with your friends. It had been 12 years since Esther had passed away, and Gary felt that he would never get over the pain of losing her or the loneliness of being an orphan. His father had died when he was only 8, and Esther had raised him alone. Like his father, Esther had been an only child, so there were no aunts and uncles, no cousins. Since Esther's passing, Gary was alone in the world. He had a lot of friends, but it was to Esther's grave that he brought his joys and his sorrows. That Sunday, Gary brought a bouquet of his mother's favorite lily of the valley from a florist on the way to the cemetery. As he approached Esther's grave, he had a strange sensation of déjà vu. There was a woman standing in front of his mother's grave with her back to him, and something about the set of her shoulders and her posture, even her hairstyle, was eerily familiar. Gary walked closer, and at the sound of his footsteps, the woman turned around, and Gry saw her face. "Mom!" Gary heard himself crying out, even as he lost consciousness, and his knees folded under him. When he came to, he found himself looking up at Esther's beloved face. She was cradling his head in her arms and running a wet handkerchief over his face. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Can you hear me?" "Mom," Gary whispered. "Is that really you?" The woman looked surprised. "Mom, you mean you're Esther Levine's son?" Gary's vision was clearer, and now he could see that there were subtle differences between this woman and his mother. She was older, of course, the age that Esther would have been if she lived, but still, the resemblance was uncanny. "I'm Esther's son, yes, Gary Levin," Gary confirmed as he tried to get back on his feet. "Who are you?" "For a moment I thought I was seeing a ghost." The woman helped him up and smiled. "I'm Kira Duchamp. I believe I'm your mother's twin." "Twin?" Gary couldn't believe his ears. "But my mom was an only child," Kira nodded sadly. "I thought I was an only child too," she said. "But when my mother passed away, I learned I was adopted, so I started looking for my birth family. It wasn't easy. The adoption had been back in the 60s. No one wanted to talk. But finally I learned who my parents were, and best of all, that I had a twin sister." "But I thought, no one separates twins!" Gary exclaimed. "Not anymore, but back then things were different," Kira explained. "I can tell you I've spent my whole life feeling that there was something missing, and there was. It broke my heart to learn that I'd found out about Esther too late to get to know her." "I think she had the same feeling," Gary said. "She was fascinated with anything to do with twins, and her greatest regret was not having siblings. But she never knew that she was adopted, or she would have gone looking for you too." "Tell me, Gary, what was she like?" Kira asked eagerly, and so Gary spent the rest of the afternoon talking about Esther, her lovely laugh, her irresistible sense of humor, her kindness. Gary and Kira made plans to meet the next day so Gary could bring the photo albums and show her his mementos of Esther. As Kira slowly leafed through a photo album, she sighed. "It's like looking at myself living a different reality," Kira said. "We really were identical. I've got to show these to my children, with your permission." "You have children?" Gary asked. "How many?" "6, Kira smiled. 4 girls, 2 boys. And I already have 2 grandbabies, and they are identical twins, just like me and Esther." "I have cousins?" Gary asked. "I have a family." "You do," Kira said. "But in reality, since Esther and I were genetically identical, they are your half-brothers and sisters." The following weekend, there was a crowd around Esther's grave. Kira came and brought her husband, her children, and her grandchildren to meet Gary and place flowers on her long-lost sister's grave. For the first time in 12 years, Gary didn't walk away alone. He was surrounded by a loving family that belonged to him. As Kira put her arm around his shoulders, Gary knew that the dark and lonely days were over. He was sure that somewhere Esther was watching and smiling.